Marcus Ryu is one of the few entrepreneurs who built a $20 billion business.
How do you lay the foundation of a winning company culture?
I think it's extremely important to think about culture. The most important thing you define in a culture are your values. And values, in my terms, they always are moral. So our values as a company were three: integrity, rationality, and collegiality. The people who were the most profoundly loyal to the company when they said why, is this because we went through difficulty together. Adversity binds more than abundance. Shared sacrifice binds more than shared success. The essence of all morality is reciprocity.
Radical transparency, top to bottom, or information on a need-to-know basis?
So the hardest challenge you have as a startup is
Step 1.
Thank you so much, Marcus. So one of the other topics which, as an early stage founder, which I struggled with a lot, was as we are building this business, you're trying to get early customers. How do you lay the foundation of a winning company culture? Um, when I talk to folks at Guidewire, one of the big things they told me was we have a phenomenal culture. We were set up to persevere through big, small, disruptions. Talk to us a little bit about that. How did you lay the foundational pillars of company culture? And looking back, I'm sure when you were 10 employees, you were not thinking about, or maybe you were. So you did. So what did that look like? What's your advice to somebody with 10 employees or 5 employees to think about company culture?
Well, actually, we thought a lot about culture, and that's partly because it was hard to get people to talk to us about our product, which didn't exist yet. I think it's extremely important to think about culture. Let me define what that culture is. The most important thing you define in a culture are your values. And values, in my terms, they always are moral. They have a moral dimension. Something like agility, speed, decisiveness. These are nice things, but they're not moral values. They're just kind of ways you'd like people to, to work and behave. A moral value is when it's like when the chips are down, when I have to make a choice between, right or wrong, we are agreed on the way that we're going to go. And the essence of a moral value is that you have to give up things that you would like in order to uphold it, right? So our values as a company were three. We said integrity, rationality, and collegiality. What is integrity? It just means telling the truth in every sense, telling the truth about what the product does, telling the truth about how the business is doing, telling the truth, to employees about on every dimension of the business, and obviously to customers. It seems very easy, but it's not a value. It's very easy to be honest if you just have happy news to share. It's much harder when you have to face up to a failing, a deficiency, a disappointment, and when you make it very clear that that's the value in the company, and then you demonstrate at moments where it's difficult, not when it's easy, when it's difficult, that you take that path, then it becomes part of a binding force in the company. They say, I understand the character of this organization. Rationality is we will make decisions based on reason, not based on instinct or seniority or whatever it might be. And collegiality meant we will treat each other as ends, not as means, meaning we will not sacrifice the well-being of people, or we will behave to a maximum degree possible as collegial equals, as opposed to a hierarchy. And again, these are things that only matter when they're tested, when you're trading off something that you would like to do, right? So I believe that those kinds of values define a culture more than these other kind of nice to have attributes, because they're showing that you are making a trade. You're trading off something that you might like for something that you think is more important.
So when you look back at that, right? So and I'm thinking of, again, early stage founder who's like, man, I have 17 problems and culture isn't one, which is like telling early customers. But I first of all, I don't agree with that at all. I haven't built this small company myself, but where were areas where culture helped you with getting more customers, retaining employees, growing employees? Where did it tangibly show up in your experience?
Yeah. So the values of the company, they showed up when there were moments that were painful. That's when they matter, right? So we had a painful moment when, the second product didn't work as promised. We had a very painful moment when we were sued by our largest competitor and the company might not have was actually at existential risk. We had painful times where we disappointed what, an investor thought that we should be able to do. And the fact that we didn't have to debate these questions, it was just the values were completely clear. They were just dispositive, and this is what they dictate, was incredibly powerful. And it aligned the entire the entire, sometimes the management team, sometimes, sometimes the larger employee base, that we don't have to second guess these things. We don't have to wonder what will Marcus or what will the other co-founders think about how we should behave. There's no room for debate.
Give us an example where you had a company defining kind of moment.
The clearest moment was when our second product didn't work. We built a claim system for insurance companies to begin with. The second product was a policy system, which is a much bigger product. It's the most mission critical system an insurance company can have. Ours didn't scale. We underestimated some kind of fundamental architectural things, and we knew that we were not going to deliver for our early customers. Some companies would be in agony. What do we say? This could be a disaster. The point for us was all the things that bad things that can happen. Yes, they were terrible, but they were not considerations. There was only one consideration, which is we have to tell the truth. If we don't tell the truth, then we're lost. We're not the company we thought we were. And that kind of clarity, and when employees see that the leadership of the company just takes it that seriously, and they just deal with the consequences, however terrible they might be, then it underscores for them what matters. So the most important thing in culture is that the leaders walk the walk, and that you uphold the values when they're hard. One thing that you might have heard me say, Ashish, is that a lesson that I learned that was extremely surprising but rewarding for me was that people are not motivated by just reward. That the more powerful binding force, of course, they want to succeed, and we're capitalists. We want to be rewarded for our achievements, and that's entirely appropriate. But in my experience, some of the most binding force, the people who were the most profoundly loyal to the company when they said why, this is because we went through difficulty together. We went through difficulty together. And my way of putting it is adversity binds more than abundance. Shared sacrifice binds more than shared success even. It doesn't mean that you're trying to generate adversity and sacrifice. It just means that if you can create a culture that's resilient in that way, that holds together in adversity, then it becomes a force that's much more binding than any kind of incentive or reward you can create.
I've also heard you talk about how you have often used that with your most senior leadership or members of your team, this mutual contract of accountability, which is sort of an extension of like, we've been through stuff together, but even now, as we have higher and higher aspirations, we have a mutual contract of accountability.
Yeah, I think it's one of the deepest moral truths. I think it's one of the essence of all morality is reciprocity. It's that I do in exchange for what you do. We are bound by it's essentially a moral exchange that we adhere to the same value, and you see my participation in this mirrored by your participation. And I think that that's the most powerful thing you can do as leaders in an organization is to demonstrate that reciprocity to your own team. We ask a lot of you, but we ask nothing of you that we are not working harder to do. We propound a set of values and we walk that walk, even if we're the ones who have to suffer the pain of it. And the example that you raise is a CEO talking to a team to say, I have to ask a lot of you in this next chapter, but this is what I want it to mean for you professionally, to mean for you economically, and this is the trust that this is what you can expect of me in my role. These are very intimate moments. You're not saying it every day or every one-on-one, but those are critical binding moments, and it's where you really bind people to the purpose.
And you also had a situation, Guidewire, where you had a large founding team, 6 founders, and you guys persevered for a long period of time, some for a decade plus and some for shorter. But maybe talk about that, choosing that founding team and the culture which bounded you folks for such a long period of time.
In every setting like this, I always say the company would have failed without any one of us. So we were a large group, but it was everyone performed some function that was absolutely critical to the company's success. And I always say these guys are my brothers. We went through a tremendous adversity together, and I would trust them with my life. Whether you have the exact mix of personalities and skills, this is something that every team must figure out for itself. The fact that we spent as much time as we did in the early days identifying those values and saying and essentially signing a contract with each other about our commitment to the project. And that commitment was, no matter how difficult this is going to be, no matter what adverse signals we may get along the way, for this period of time, we're not looking left or right. We're here for the duration, and we're pledging our honor to it. And that sense of commitment was absolutely essential to get through the very difficult early days.
Switching gears, were there any rituals which and sort of company sort of core operating procedures which people knew that this which would associate them back to these values on a periodic basis?
So I tried to make a point, and many leaders in the company really tried to make a point of citing the values as a reason for action. So like, we're facing a dilemma of some sort. Do we delay this product release? How do we address this particular customer issue? We have this employee issue. It was very encouraged, and I always tried to model this to cite the values. What do the values that we have, the kind of like a constitution? What does Article 1 tell us that we are supposed to do in this situation, and cite that? So the values were actually guides to action. They were not just slogans on a wall. That was important. It wasn't a value, but it was part of the culture, as I was describing, was this embrace of adversity. The fact that it's difficult, and we're here for that. In fact, difficulty is not, as they say, is not a bug. It was the feature. It was the reason we existed. Because if it were not difficult, it wouldn't be worth doing. We wouldn't be rewarded. Others would have done it before. Others will copy us. But it has to be difficult. And so we kind of ritualized that by saying, every quarter I give out was called a Granite Award. And it was a very plain block. It was a stone that just said, unadorned, so-and-so wins the Granite Award for the quarter. And it was always awarded to the person who had done the most unglamorous and difficult thing, and we tried to lionize that quality. The people who had done something, not just beyond the call of duty, but something that was extremely difficult and that would have been easy to turn away from, but actually did the hard thing. It could have been, slogging through some data conversion problem, or fixing some intractable bug, or, clearing some tech debt that was really thankless. And we said, that's what we're going to lionize. And I think that became very special for people, and it was emblematic of the culture.
So, to summarize, if you were to say, invest in the culture early for 3 or 4 reasons, it will help you. And I deeply agree with you. But sort of the sort of 3 or 4 things which will show up in my bottom line as this founder who's fighting with life and death, is it fair to say it helps you persevere through tough times and maintain the team retention, hiring new team members, finding the highest potential amongst your people to be able to, whichever they're doing, selling, innovating, building? What else would you add to that list?
I think it derives to the people want to be part of something larger than themselves. That's the thing. They want to be part. And if you want to activate people's deepest loyalties, their deepest creativity, they have to feel like they're part of something larger. And that something larger usually has to have a moral character to it. It doesn't mean that you're curing cancer or doing charitable work, but it means that you're doing something that is principled. And those principles then have to be are more powerful when you express them, and then when you show that they are actually guides to action. They don't have to be the same ones that I've suggested that work for my company, but I would urge any founder to identify what they are.
I apologize for oversimplifying this, but I really feel it both from a founding team side, but from an employee side, specifically in this market where things are so competitive and hiring is so hard. Both employees and or teammates and founders are struggling on both sides. People hop companies too fast. Founders are finding it harder and harder to create a mission to attract the best and brightest, because if it becomes an auction game and who can give the most, it's not rewarding over a long period of time for anyone, because there's no sense of accomplishment, there's no sense of mission. So more than ever, I think we need this a clear sense of purpose from both sides, right, to build winning organizations.
Well, it can be a lose-lose situation where employees long to be part of something that's not, that's durable and loyal, but they don't feel that companies will give that to them. And then companies say everyone's just a mercenary, right? So I think as an employer, and that's, you have to stand for something. And I don't mean that you take a position on political issues. It's just as an organization, as a collection of people, what does it stand for? What is it aspiring to do? What binds it in terms of its principles? And then part of that principle is that you let people self-select. And they say, it's not for you. If that's not enough, it's fine.
So funny enough, we didn't talk about T-shirts and parties and offsites, any of that in the culture. But let me ask you a few quick fire questions. In office versus remote. Like, I don't think like in Guidewire you had that problem, but now what do you like in office versus remote?
I'm a huge believer of in office.
Yeah.
I think it's very.
Is it disqualifying for you in your investments if somebody's all remote? Yeah.
No, but close.
But close.
No, but close.
Mandates for mandating certain behaviors of like attendance and showing certain versus inherently trusting people to do what they think should be best.
People can identify what's rewarded and what's not. So it's what does this organization reward, and that has to be modeled by its leaders, and that works incomparably more powerfully than
So
any
no
mandate.
mandates, just follow, lead
You-
by example and becomes a
But what is modeled and then what is rewarded? What is rewarded? Who advances in this organization and who doesn't? That's where a company expresses its values.
radical transparency, top to bottom,
Mm.
or need or information on a need to know basis.
I cannot imagine running a successful startup without radical transparency. There may be some models where that works, but it is the hardest challenge you have as a startup is getting everyone to march in the same direction. How you do this with adding information impedance, you just made a hard job even harder.
In those long journeys, hire far, like the classic advice is, hire slowly and fire fast versus invest in somebody for the long term, even if after they're making a bunch of mistakes.
I'm definitely in the latter category, but I also believe that something like a 50% failure rate on hiring is probably a law of nature, right? You have to accept that, but the switching cost of trading people too quickly, I think, is enormous.
And your view on perks, as much perks. They're a Series A founder. You have 15 million in the bank. As much perks as the budget can afford, or great work is your best perk.
I'm the wrong person to ask because as a founder, but I think actually I have a general point to make there. I think as a founder, you are motivated you have an engine of motivation that others do not. Even the most motivated employees do not have that same inner fire and engine that a founder has. And you have to recognize that. And you have to be realistic about the other kind of human needs that other people have, as opposed to say, why isn't everyone as passionate as I am? That's a completely unreasonable standard.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Marcus. Loved it.
Love it.